You've done the gym. You've done the diet. You've done the version where you woke up at 6 a.m. and meal prepped on Sundays and tracked everything in an app and felt, briefly, like someone who had finally figured it out. And then you stopped. Not because you're lazy. You did it for weeks, sometimes months, with genuine commitment and real effort. You stopped because it was exhausting in a way that the initial motivation couldn't sustain indefinitely. Because the gym felt like a job you hadn't agreed to. Because the diet felt like a negotiation with every meal that was supposed to be simple. Because somewhere around week 8 or week 12, the effort required started costing more than the results were returning, and the whole structure quietly collapsed. And now you're back to roughly where you started, which is fine. Your body works, you're not sick. You just don't feel quite the way you'd like to feel. And every attempt to change that has eventually produced the same cycle. Effort, progress, exhaustion, collapse, return to baseline. And you're not sure how many more cycles you have in you before you just accept that this is the way things are. Here's the thing nobody tells you. The problem was never your willpower. The problem was the mechanism. You were trying to use effort to override a biology that is specifically designed to resist sustained effort-based restriction. That battle has a predetermined outcome, and it isn't yours. Japanese daily life produces different body outcomes than Western daily life. Not because Japanese people have more discipline or better genetics, but because the daily structure of Japanese life contains 9 specific habits that quietly align with the body's natural rhythms, rather than fighting them. No gym required, no diet required, just a different daily structure, producing different results almost as a side effect of being lived. The word for this alignment in Japanese thinking is shitsen, naturalness, the quality of something that flows with, rather than against the nature of things. Applied to body health, shitsen isn't a method. It's a relationship with the body's signals, hunger, fullness, energy, fatigue, that treats them as honest information rather than obstacles to override. When daily habits are built around that relationship, the body tends to find and maintain its own healthy balance without requiring the exhausting negotiation that every diet and gym regimen eventually demands. 9 habits, each one small. Each one buildable into an already existing daily rhythm without requiring willpower, scheduling, or a version of yourself that doesn't exist yet. Habit 1. Hara Hachi Bu. The body already knows when to stop. The most documented dietary habit in Okinawan longevity research isn't a food, it's a pause. Hara Hachi Bu. Eat until you are 8 parts full out of 10. Works through a simple biological mechanism that most eating advice quietly ignores. The body's fullness signal takes 15 to 20 minutes to travel from the stomach to the brain via the hormonal pathway. Every meal eaten to the subjective point of fullness has already overshot the actual biological full point by 15 to 20 minutes worth of food. Every meal, every day, across years. The accumulated daily overshoot is the mechanism behind gradual, unexplained weight gain, the kind that happens without any single bad meal being the obvious cause, because it's built from thousands of small daily overshoots that individually feel like nothing. Hara Hachi Bu doesn't ask you to eat less. It asks you to stop slightly before the fullness signal arrives, at the point where you think you might be around 8 parts full, and to then wait 15 minutes. The signal arrives. The additional food wasn't needed. No restriction occurred, just a slight recalibration of the timing of stopping, which over years produces a dramatically different cumulative effect. The practical challenge is that the hunger and fullness signals in many modern Western eaters have been so consistently overridden by portion sizes, by distracted eating, by eating past full as a habit, that they've become faint and unreliable. The first few weeks of practicing Hara Hachi Bu feel uncertain because the signal you're supposed to be listening for has been quiet for years. It returns, gradually, as it's consistently honored. The takeaway: at your next meal, eat at roughly 70% of your usual pace. Stop when you think you might be around 8 parts full. Sit for 15 minutes before deciding whether you need more. Most of the time, you won't. Habit 2. Washoku. Eat many small things rather than few large ones. Washoku, traditional Japanese cuisine, is built around a meal structure that the West has largely abandoned. Many small dishes of varied things rather than one large portion of a few things. A traditional washoku meal might include a small bowl of rice, a small portion of fish, a small bowl of miso soup, 2 or 3 small dishes of pickled or cooked vegetables, and nothing else of significant volume. The total caloric content is often modest. The nutritional variety is high. The satiety produced is disproportionate to the caloric load because the variety of textures, flavors, and ingredients signals completion to the brain more effectively than a large portion of a single thing. This is the mechanism behind the Japanese dietary pattern's consistently low rates of obesity, despite no cultural emphasis on calorie counting or portion restriction. The meal structure itself produces natural satiety at a lower caloric intake, not through discipline, but through design. The Western meal structure, a large central protein, a large side starch, a large side vegetable, produces the opposite effect. High caloric density, low variety signal, lower satiety per calorie consumed. More food is required to produce the same fullness signal, not because the appetite is larger, but because the brain requires more varied input to register completion. The takeaway: one meal this week, restructure the plate. Instead of one large central thing, make 5 or 6 small things. Same food groups, dramatically different proportions. Notice whether the fullness signal arrives differently. Habit 3. Hashi. Eat slower without trying. Hashi, chopsticks, are the most overlooked structural contribution to Japanese eating pace, and they work through a mechanism so simple it's almost embarrassing. Chopsticks physically constrain the amount of food that can be picked up in a single bite, which slows the pace of eating automatically without requiring any conscious effort to eat slower. Eating pace is one of the most consistently documented factors in the relationship between eating behavior and body composition. Faster eating consistently produces higher caloric intake before the fullness signal arrives, because the 15-minute hormonal lag means that faster eating covers more ground before the break engages. Slower eating consistently produces lower caloric intake for the same subjective fullness, because the break engages before as much ground has been covered. A chopstick-enforced eating pace isn't a mindfulness practice. It isn't a technique requiring attention or discipline. It's a structural constraint that produces a slower pace as a side effect of the tool being used, in the same way that using a smaller spoon slows soup consumption, without anyone deciding to eat their soup slowly. The takeaway: eat one meal per day with chopsticks for 2 weeks. Not as a cultural appropriation, not as a performance, just as a structural constraint on pace, the same way you'd use a smaller plate to constrain portion size. Notice whether the 15-minute wait at the end of the meal produces a different signal than usual. Habit 4. Ma in meals. The pause between bites. Ma, intentional empty space, applied to eating, is the Japanese mealtime practice of setting utensils down between bites, completing the chew and swallow before lifting food again, and allowing small natural pauses to occur throughout the meal rather than maintaining continuous loading. This is distinct from eating slowly in the conventional sense. It isn't about chewing each bite 30 times or making a conscious project of the meal's pace. It's about restoring the natural rhythm of eating. Bite, chew, swallow, pause, next bite, that the modern Western habit of continuous loading has eliminated. The pause between bites isn't a discipline. It was the default. Continuous loading is the aberration that requires effort, in the sense that it requires actively overriding the natural completion of one bite before beginning the next. The practical effect is similar to the chopstick mechanism. Slower pace, more time for the fullness signal to travel, but the mechanism is different. Ma in meals works through rhythm restoration rather than physical constraint, and it produces the additional effect of making the meal itself more present as an experience rather than a background event. The takeaway: at your next meal, set your utensils down between each bite. Not consciously, elaborately, just don't pick them up again until the previous bite is fully chewed and swallowed. Notice how the pace of the meal changes without any effort being applied to eating slowly. Habit 5. Aruku. Walk as a daily structure, not an exercise. Japan consistently ranks among the highest countries in the world for daily step counts. Not because of a cultural fitness ethic, but because of urban design, commuting patterns, and a deeply embedded cultural habit of walking as ordinary transportation and daily structure rather than as exercise. Aruku, walking, in the Japanese cultural context is not a workout. It is not something done in athletic clothing with a fitness tracker, producing log data to be reviewed later. It is simply how one moves through the world, to the train station, to the shops, around the neighborhood, to and from most things that are within reasonable walking distance. The steps accumulate not through a dedicated exercise session, but through the ordinary architecture of a walking-oriented daily life. The body health effects of this accumulated daily walking are substantial and well documented. not because walking is a particularly intense physical activity, but because it is an anti-sedentary one. A body that walks as part of its daily structure maintains a baseline metabolic activity that a car and desk lifestyle completely suppresses. The difference between 8,000 daily steps accumulated naturally and 2,000 daily steps accumulated between a car seat and a desk chair is meaningful over months and years without a single gym session being involved. The practical challenge for most Western adults is that daily walking has been architecturally designed out of daily life. Cars replace walkable distances. Elevators replace stairs. Online delivery replaces errand trips. The habit requires some deliberate architectural restoration, parking further away, taking the longer route, walking to things that are technically walkable but usually aren't walked to. The takeaway: identify one regular trip in your weekly routine that is technically walkable but currently driven or ordered online. Walk it this week, not as exercise, as ordinary transportation. Notice whether the mindset difference between exercise and getting somewhere changes how the walk feels. Habit 6. Ofuro. Stress is stored in the body. This one isn't about food or movement at all. It's about cortisol. Chronic stress produces sustained cortisol elevation. Chronic cortisol elevation does several things simultaneously. It drives fat deposition, particularly in the abdominal region. It increases appetite, specifically for high-calorie foods. It impairs sleep quality, which further disrupts the hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin. And it creates a physiological environment in which the body is actively inclined to store rather than metabolize energy. Chronic stress doesn't just feel bad. It biochemically promotes the exact conditions that every diet and gym program is trying to reverse, while those programs' demands simultaneously add to the stress load. Ofuro, the Japanese evening bath ritual, is the most consistent stress regulation practice in traditional Japanese daily life, and it works through a specific mechanism. 15 to 20 minutes in water at approximately 40 degrees Celsius activates the parasympathetic nervous system, reducing cortisol, improving sleep quality, and creating the neurochemical environment in which the body is inclined to rest and restore rather than defend and store. This isn't a relaxation effect in the vague, mood-based sense. It's a hormonal event. And its downstream effects on body composition, through improved sleep, reduced cortisol-driven appetite, and reduced stress-driven fat storage, are real, measurable, and produced without a single dietary change or additional movement session. The takeaway: 3 evenings this week, draw a warm bath before bed. 15 minutes minimum. Phone outside the room. Notice the quality of your sleep on those 3 nights, and notice whether the appetite the following morning feels different from your usual baseline. Habit 7. Shun. Eat what's in season. Shun. The Japanese concept of seasonality in food is the practice of eating foods at the peak of their natural season, which produces a dietary pattern that strongly favors fresh, whole, minimally processed foods, almost as a side effect of the habit, rather than through deliberate nutritional planning. Seasonal eating isn't primarily a health practice in the Japanese cultural framework. It's an aesthetic and culinary one. The first bamboo shoots of spring, the matsutake mushrooms of autumn, the sweetest tomatoes of midsummer, experienced as the particular pleasure of things at their best. But its dietary consequences are significant. A person eating seasonally is eating fresh produce at its nutritional peak, avoiding the processed foods that dominate out-of-season eating, and naturally varying their diet across the year in a way that supports gut microbiome diversity. The Western dietary pattern, by contrast, is almost completely deseasonalized. Strawberries are available in January, tomatoes in February, anything at any time, regardless of its actual growing season. The convenience is real. The consequence is a dietary pattern dominated by food that traveled far to arrive out of season, often processed in ways that extend shelf life but reduce nutritional density. The practical application of Shun doesn't require memorizing seasonal produce charts. It requires one simple habit. At the weekly shop, buy at least one item from whatever is currently in prominent seasonal display. The thing that is plentiful, inexpensive, and clearly at the peak of its moment. Build the week's meals around it. Repeat. The takeaway: this week's shop, choose the most abundant-looking, most reasonably priced fresh produce you can find. The thing that's clearly in season right now. Build at least 2 meals around it. That's the habit. Habit 8. Mottainai. Waste nothing, eat smaller. Mottainai, the Japanese concept of regret over waste, applied to food produces a specific, consistent eating behavior. Smaller portions served, eaten fully, with nothing wasted and nothing left to compulsively finish. The Western relationship with food portions has been shaped by a food industry incentivized to maximize portion size. Larger portions justify higher prices, create the perception of value, and leverage the deeply embedded cultural norm of finishing what's on the plate. The result is a cultural baseline portion size that significantly exceeds what the body actually requires, served on a plate that must be cleared as a matter of politeness and completion. Mottainai inverts this dynamic. The cultural norm is to serve exactly what will be eaten, with waste being the social failure rather than leaving food on the plate. Smaller, accurate portions are served. Those portions are eaten fully and with appreciation. The absence of excess on the plate removes the compulsion to eat past fullness simply because the food is there. This is a structural solution to portion size in the same way that smaller plates are a structural solution, not through discipline or restriction, but through changing the default quantity presented to the body for consumption. When the default quantity aligns with what the body actually needs, no negotiation is required. The takeaway: serve yourself a slightly smaller portion than usual, 10 to 15% less, and eat it fully, without the option of seconds immediately available. Wait 15 minutes. In most cases, the slightly smaller portion plus the 15-minute wait produces the same satiety as the larger portion would have. Over time, the smaller portion becomes the new calibrated default. Habit 9. Karada no ko. Listen to the body before eating. Karada no ko, literally, the body's voice, is the Japanese concept of attentiveness to physical sensation, applied here specifically to the practice of checking in with the body before eating, to distinguish between genuine physical hunger and the other reasons people eat: habit, boredom, stress, social cues, the passage of time. Most modern eating is triggered not by physical hunger, but by clock hunger, the habitual expectation that food arrives at certain times, regardless of whether the body is actually hungry, or by emotional eating, triggered by stress, boredom, or habit. Neither of these triggers produces eating that aligns with the body's actual energy needs, which means neither produces the satiety signal that genuine hunger eating produces, which means neither tells the body it's full in the same clear way. The Karada no ko practice is simple. Before eating anything, pause for 30 seconds and ask honestly whether what you're feeling is genuine physical hunger, the specific sensation of the stomach being empty and energy being low, or something else. This doesn't mean refusing to eat unless genuinely hungry. It means knowing which one it is, which changes the relationship with the eating even when the eating happens. This habit, practiced consistently, gradually restores the clarity of the body's hunger and fullness, signals that years of clock eating and emotional eating have muffled. The signals were always there. They just haven't been listened to for long enough that they've become faint. The takeaway: before every meal and every snack for 1 week, pause for 30 seconds and honestly identify what triggered the eating impulse. Not to judge it, just to name it. Physical hunger, clock habit, stress, boredom. 1 week of naming changes the relationship with those triggers more than any dietary rule ever could. None of these 9 habits involves a gym. None of them involves a diet, a restriction, a tracked calorie, or a negotiation with every meal. Each one simply aligns the daily structure of eating, moving, and resting slightly more closely with what the body was designed to do, responding to its own signals, moving through the world as ordinary daily life rather than as a fitness program, resting deeply enough to allow the hormonal environment to support health rather than fight it. The results, over months, are real, not dramatic, not fast. Just the quiet, cumulative outcome of a daily structure that works with the body's biology rather than against it. The same daily structure that Japanese daily life has quietly contained for generations, producing the same quiet, cumulative results without anyone calling it a health program. Your body already knows what it's doing. These 9 habits just give it the conditions to do it. If this felt like something your body needed to hear, there's more waiting for you here.